Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls online video with me, Sherman. Today guys, I'm going to be talking to you guys about the meta. And not the meta that you guys think, but what the meta means. See, the meta is a term used in MMOs as the most effective tactic available. But then you have to look at Elder Scrolls design. And you have to look at Elder Scrolls the game and wonder what that means. Because in Elder Scrolls, we have the ability to make our characters how we want. But the devs do give us tools to create the most effective tactic available for our group dynamic. See, what we have right now is we have a very singular meta. And I'm not saying that that meta is bad, but it's not designed for the play of everyone's playstyle. It's designed to create an idea. And what I'm going to tell you guys is probably one of the most fundamental things about this game. This game was designed and created on the idea that you can play how you want. That means if you want to play a light armor tank using a resto staff, you can do it. But you have to make a group that works with it. So that means you have to create the most effective tactic available for that group. So how do you create a group that works with a light armor resto staff tank? You take the tools available and you create a group dynamic with it. Have you guys ever wondered why we have major fracture on an armor set, but we don't have major breach? We only have major breach in two things, or three things, technically. Sword and board, pierce armor, major breach from the destruction staff line, and then we have breach with the warden. But look at fracture. We have it on sword and board. The DK has major fracture. The Templar, or the warden has major fracture, and the Nightblade has major fracture. Then we have it on a gear set. Why is it we have it on those things, but we don't have major breach on that many different things? My thoughts on this are because they want us to have tools available. So they create new tools every update to give us the advantages of creating unique group dynamics. That allows us to create the best groups possible, or the most effective tactic available for each group dynamic. Can you take a two-handed sword in medium armor and tank with it? Is it possible? Well, the game allows it, so it should be possible, correct? Okay, how do you do that? Well, you got to take the advantages of what you're using and build on it. For medium armor, that's dodge rolling, because it doesn't have high resistances. It doesn't have a lot of tools to it that give you that great advantage like heavy armor does, where it gives you high resistances. So you have to build it differently and play it differently. So how do I make that to its advantage? How do I make it work? Well, I have one set that could work, or I could pick a class that would allow me to make it work, or I could do different things. Or I could take the easiest route and just use sword and shield. But what if I don't want it to be easy? I want it to be something I'll have fun with instead. See, ESO wasn't designed to have a singular meta. It was designed to allow multiple metas, because it wasn't built on an idea of a singular fashion. It was designed to allow multiple most effective tactics available. So how do you do that? Well, you have to find out what works for you. You have to find out what you enjoy to play. Then you have to build your group around that. Not take one character and go, this is how I want my character to play, and everyone else can kiss my butt, but to take that one character, put it into a group, and then design the group to work with each other. So this way you can find what works best for you and the other individuals in your group. What I'm telling you is not that the game only has one established. Just because we have one established meta that works really good, it doesn't mean that we couldn't create another that works as good but in a different way. And we couldn't create another that does the same thing, and another that does the same thing. That's what I'm trying to say. See, when people talk about the meta, they're talking about the singular meta that we have right now, because it's the most prominent found on the internet. But when you try to introduce a new idea that doesn't fit with that design, that's why they get frustrated, is because it doesn't fit within their group dynamic. But if you create a group dynamic that works for you and your friends, and yes, you share it with everyone else, it's more likely to become more popular because it's something different. It's not the standard. Because not everyone wants to play the same thing. See, ESO wasn't designed that way. If it was, we would be restricted on our armor types, on our weapon types, on our class. Like, our class would be restricted, but we're not. Because the devs created a sandbox open-ended element to that. That allows our characters to be built how we want them to be built, but we still have that idea of a rotation. That'll never change. But does a tank do a rotation? No. A tank plays active-reactive. What about a healer? Nope, same thing. They play active-reactive. A DPS uses a rotation. So the other day somebody asked, not only me, but I saw this, I've seen this posted on the forums many a times, how do I get Reliquin and Advancing Yodokai? What sets should I use instead of those? And I told him, use what works best for you, that gives you the greatest advantage. And they said, well, how will I know? I'm like, testing, trying, because there's so many sets in the game that offer the same advantages in the 2 to 4 piece that it's the 5 piece that makes up the difference. So it really comes down to the player's choice on what works best for them. If you're going to build for the meta, that's what you're going to do. You're going to use what's best for you. But if you like that build that you've already created, guess what? It still works. And here's why. Because the game, the developers, changed the rule set of the game to allow every gear set to be gotten at CP 160. And they allowed every gear set to be geared or to be made into a higher quality, leading up to a gold quality. All enchants can be made to gold enchants at CP 160. So that means gear and enchantments are all on equal levels. It's just the way the gear set works to your advantage. So what sets can you use to mimic the meta that's not meta? Well, you can take something like Vicious Ophidian and Hunting's Rage. You can take Night Mother's Gaze and Vipers. You can use a lot of different combinations to get a general setup that's similar to the meta. It might not be as effective as the meta, but it's similar. But here's the crazy question. How do I make an Ice Staff Warden tank fit within the meta? You can't. Because it's not designed to work with that. Well, what about a two-handed tank? Again, not designed to work with that. Well, what about this? Nothing's designed to work with it. That's why you see a lot of times that when people show their tank options, if they mimic the meta with a different class. Like if you take a Templar, put them in Ebon, Alkosh, and Bloodspawn, do they work as effective as a DK? No. They can still do the job, but they're not as effective. Why not? Because they don't have the same tool set. They're utilizing some of the tool set, but they're missing the rest of it. Well, what about an ice tank? Same thing. They don't use the same tool set. It's a different play structure. So you have to build your group to work with that structure. If it doesn't fit within your dynamic, you have to make it fit. And how do you make it fit? Well, you have to adjust the rest of the group dynamic to make it fit. Because you got to think, an ice staff doesn't have major breach or major fracture like they want in the meta. So how does the ice staff fit into that? Well, that would mean one person would have to run Night Mother's Gaze so you could get major fracture. But they're also not running Alkosh. There's always 2 tanks in a group when it comes to a trial. So you can have your other tank run Alkosh. Well, what if my other tank doesn't want to use Alkosh, wants to use something else? Then somebody else needs to use Alkosh. See, working as a group means you're willing to make sacrifices to make up differences. If you're not willing to make a sacrifice for your group, you're not willing to work as a group. And see, this is where a lot of the argument comes in the meta when they talk about, well, this is the most effective tactic available, but they're not willing to alter that tactic to fit other groups, other types of players into their dynamic, because it doesn't give them the same results. Because they're taking away one factor to create a new factor. And unless they can incorporate that factor into their group dynamic, it doesn't work. This is why we have the argument between meta and non-meta players. See, I'm not a non-meta player. I just don't play the meta they do. I play a different meta. And I found a group that worked, and we worked together and created the most effective tactic available for our group, and it worked. It worked really well. The problem is that when we played with other groups that followed the meta, we didn't fit in to their design. And that's why this game doesn't have a singular meta. It actually has a multitude of thousands of metas that have never been established and become prominent on the web. Because the other meta has been so focused on it that nobody else has created anything new. And this is why we have a singular meta. This is why we also have a lack of tanks and healers, is because it's so singular. I have a friend who started playing a healer recently. They went and got the Olarum set and the Infallible Aether set. They put it on their Sork. They started running a group, running with a trial guild. Then the trial guild told him they wanted him to have these sets, these other sets. So they went and got those other sets. Then they told him that they weren't producing the kind of return that their Templar did that left the guild because they quit the game. And they wanted him to go make a Templar for that reason. Now he's quit the game. And he hasn't quit the game. He's quit doing trials because he got tired of being told how to play. He liked playing a sorcerer healer. That was his favorite thing. Now he can't play it with the group he was playing with because they're not willing to compensate or to adjust their group for that. Because they want to play the established prominent meta, but they're not willing to compensate for the adjustment of him playing a sorcerer healer. And yes, this guy has healed every trial in the game, guys. Every trial. And not once was it, like, major difficult for him. Like he said, it was the easiest thing he's ever done, and he really enjoyed it because it was something he was having fun with. He has a Templar healer, but he uses that Templar healer in a different way from the meta because he doesn't want to play that character as a meta healer. He wants to play it as something different in a different group dynamic. He has a tank that's non-meta, that doesn't use Sword and Board. He uses an Ice Staff. He has a Warden Ice Staff tank. Can't get in a group because it's not the meta. And it's not the meta they want. It's the meta he wants to play. See, that's the problem with games like ESO, is ESO offers a lot of opportunity and viability in a lot of different things, but because we have an established, prominent meta, a lot of people don't like the idea of outside ideas or play styles because it diminishes their play style. But they don't realize that they're just diminishing everyone else's. And I've been in groups of many different types of tanks, healers, DPS, everything. And not once have I ever, like, kicked somebody because they weren't playing to the standards I liked. I asked them to adjust to my play style, and I would adjust to theirs. Because that's what it's all about. That's what this game is all about. It's finding that right group dynamic that you like and playing it. It's finding that right build and playstyle you enjoy. Now, can somebody playing a resto staff tank work as good as another type of tank? Yeah, they can. They just work differently. That means if your group isn't willing to adjust for that type of tank, then you're actually hurting that person by not allowing them to play. And you're hurting your own group by not adjusting to that person's playstyle. Which in turn means it's hurting the game. And it's not just hurting one area of the game. Because we don't just have a PvE meta. We have a PvP meta too. Even though the PvP meta is more open-ended than the PvE meta, there is still an established meta in PvE, in PvP. There's an established meta in both. But it doesn't mean that you can't play something else. In fact, most of the time, most PvPers try to come up with something that they enjoy playing and just play it. Because there's eventually going to be a fight they'll win. If not multiple fights. And I always find it funny when I watch PvP videos and they're edited to mass extent. Because they're always editing out their failure. They're never editing, they never keep their failures in there. Because nobody's perfect. And in PvP, that's a no man's land. That means there's open opportunity for anything to happen in there. Where in PvE, it's a little bit more easier to establish a good structure in a group that you can create multiple metas that work within each other. And it's just a matter of dealing with it. Like the last time I staff tanked, I remember I was in a group with 2 stamina DPS and a healer. And the DPS were mad that we didn't have major fracture. But the funny thing was that the Nightblade was already applying major fracture, and he still wanted me to do it. And I was like, dude, I can't do major fracture. I'm using dual ice staves, and you're already using it. And it would be a waste for both of us to be applying major fracture, wouldn't it? And he's like, but I'm not. And I said, you're using this ability, right? And he goes, yeah. And I said, you're using major fracture. You're applying it every 6 seconds in your rotation. Because you're using that Nightblade ability that does that. I think it's surprise attack. And I'm going, so you're applying major fracture already. So you don't need to worry about me using an ice staff. You can keep major fracture applied for you and the other DPS. And that's when it was kind of like somebody slapped him in the face. He's like, oh wow, you're right. And I was like, yeah, so there's no problem here. Let's just do the dungeon. We completed that dungeon. In fact, we completed it and they all got rewarded with the fast time run. And it's something they had never gotten before. And it wasn't because I was playing an ice tank that did it. It was because we worked as a group and established our own group dynamic that worked. And it worked really well. I was still using Crusher Enchant. I was still using Weakening on my back bar. Actually, I was using Crusher on my back bar, Weakening on the front bar because of Wall of Elements, until they changed it, and then I went to Crusher front bar, Weakening on the back bar, but I still maintained all that stuff. The point here is that there is so many different ways to garner different things that we can play this game with a multitude of different structures. And it doesn't have to be the way it is. A meta is just a most effective tactic available for that group dynamic. So when somebody tells me that there is only one meta, that's a lie. Because every group dynamic has a meta. You just have to find it. And you have to make it work. And once you establish that, and you create that idea, and the rest of the community can see the options available, that's when this game will explode. That's when the end game will become nothing but players. And when people are like, oh, we don't have this kind of we don't have a tank, they can say, okay, we can get this guy who's willing to tank. He's using an ice staff build, so we can have him stay with the Magicka people, and we can have our stamina character stay with the guy that running sword and board, or with the person running. We can have one person equip Night Mother's Gaze. You have a lot of different tools available to create a group dynamic. But you need to find what works best for you and your group to create that dynamic and allow that dynamic to happen. And yes, ice staff tanking can be done even without sturdy gear. Because trust me, light armor, shields, you can mitigate a crap ton of damage. Even from bosses. But this does require you to build for really high magic recovery. Because you want that resource there for that. And you gotta do a lot of heavy attacks. And no, you don't have to play in heavy armor to get resources back from that. If you watch this, I'm gonna get rid of some of my stamina real quick. And you can even see for yourselves. This is medium armor heavy attack. I get 2,672 resources back from my heavy attack. When I'm using a two-handed in heavy armor, I get 3,000 something back. Only almost 1,000 more. So even in light armor, I'd be getting 2,762 or whatever, or 2,672. But I'd be getting the same amount back with a resto staff. Well, actually, I'd be getting a little less back because the resto staff gets, or I'd get more back on resto staff. But as destruction staff, I'd be getting about the same. And it wouldn't just be an ice staff. It could be a lightning staff. It could be a fire staff. All you have to do is learn to play that way. And it's not hard. It's just a matter of doing. What's hard is putting together a group dynamic that is the most effective tactic available. Because now you're talking about a different group dynamic that's not already prominent and established. But it is possible. Because the game's designed to allow it. And not just allow it in the sense of, oh, guess what, I can do this. It's allowable because the game's structure is designed that way. It's designed for us to be able to play how we want, as long as you follow the rules of the game's design. That means tank, healer, damage dealer. If your group is made up of that in PvE, it will work. PvP is a different structure altogether. You got to look at PvP from the mindset of somebody who's played like a MOBA. And that is, you have brawlers, you have support, you have damage dealers, you have tanky characters, that kind of stuff. But they work in a different aspect than they do here. You have to look at it from a battlefield perspective, mainly. You have your heavy armored warriors up front. You have your medium armor guys who come in and dish out some major damage. You have your mages who fire from ranged. You have your ranged people with bows. You have a lot of different options in PvP than you do in PvE. PvE is more structured, and you can really define your playstyle with the way you choose to play. But at the same time, you got to remember that you're building a group. You're not building for yourself. You're building a group. And every time you make a build, You have to make sure it works into the dynamic that you're trying to build for. And that's what a meta truly is a most effective tactic available. And in ESO, it's whatever your group dynamic is. Does this mean that a lot of people will be running Reliquant Advancing Yodokai on every build? No. It means that there might be some people running Reliquant a lot, because it is one of the most effective sets for DPS right now. But they might be running a multitude of other sets, like Night Mother's Gaze, Kvetch's Gladiator. You don't know, because their group dynamic is different than yours. But it doesn't mean it won't work with yours. It's just different because they're using different tools in their group for that purpose. In the next video, guys, I'm going to be talking about rotations and how they work and how you can put together your own rotations utilizing any skill combination just about in the game for DPS. That means damaging skills, that kind of stuff, so you can get the most advantageous build out of your character. This allows for more diversity in the game, and it allows for a lot of people to find their own niche playstyle that works within the game's design. But a rotation is just a combination of abilities and light attacks with some heavy attacks thrown in for resource return. They're not complicated. There's also heavy attack rotations, light attack rotations. There's a lot of different rotations. And they work with different builds because of the way the build is structured. But that's pretty much it for the video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd appreciate you guys hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. And this guy might see you in game. Bye.